Think Like Socrates, How to Question Your Way to Truth. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. They say the loudest voices win the room. But what if the wisest voice is the one asking the quietest question? In an age where opinions are flung like darts and certainty is worn like armor, something essential is being lost: the art of thinking. Not reacting. Not assuming. Not parroting. But thinking, slowly, deliberately, with the kind of curiosity that can unravel illusions and reveal what's real. This book is not about finding all the right answers. It's about learning how to ask the right questions. And there may be no better guide for this journey than a barefoot man from ancient Athens who claimed to know nothing, and yet became the cornerstone of Western philosophy. Socrates never shouted to be heard. He questioned to understand. In courtroom trials and city streets, he turned casual conversations into crucibles of discovery. With every "What do you mean by that?" he peeled away a layer of assumption. With every "How do you know?" he exposed the hidden scaffolding of belief. Today, we don't need louder voices. We need brighter flashlights. As Voltaire once said, judge a man by his questions rather than by his answers. To think like Socrates is not to dominate a conversation, it's to light a path. Whether you're a leader, parent, student, or seeker, the ability to question well is not just a mental tool, it's a moral courage. This book is a map. The terrain is your mind. The goal is truth. The way forward begins with a question. Chapter 1: The Death of Certainty. A king once asked his oracle who the wisest man alive was. The answer came back: Socrates. Puzzled, the philosopher set out to disprove it. He visited politicians, poets, and craftsmen, people sure of their expertise. But what he found was this: they spoke with confidence, yet their reasoning was hollow. Socrates realized his wisdom lay not in knowing more, but in knowing how little he truly understood. Today, certainty is currency. In meetings, on social media, in classrooms and newsrooms, we reward those who speak first, loudest, and with conviction. The danger is that conviction often arrives long before comprehension. We inherit opinions like hand-me-down coats, comfortable, familiar, rarely examined. And when those beliefs go unchallenged, they harden into dogma. To think like Socrates is to declare a quiet rebellion against unearned certainty. It's to treat belief not as a fortress to defend, but as a house to inspect, every wall knocked, every floorboard tested. When someone says it's just common sense, the Socratic thinker wonders, common to whom? Based on what? This kind of thinking is not a trick, nor a game of gotcha. It is, at its core, an act of intellectual humility. Socratic questioning doesn't seek to dismantle belief for the sake of winning an argument. It seeks clarity. It seeks light. It's the process of pausing at the first step of a staircase and asking, where does this lead, and why am I climbing it? Imagine you're in a team meeting. The plan is bold. We must double our marketing budget to stay ahead. A nod of agreement moves like a wave across the room. But one voice quietly interjects. What does stay ahead mean for us? Not in defiance. Not to derail. But to dig. The room stills. The spell of assumption breaks. Thought begins. This is how Socratic thinking works in practice. It doesn't require a toga or a podium, just presence. The discipline to slow the rush to agreement. The courage to ask the inconvenient question. The patience to wait for real clarity. But make no mistake, this path is not comfortable. To question deeply is to unearth not only flawed logic but fragile identities. People often don't defend ideas, they defend their sense of self. That's why questions feel threatening. That's why silence often follows them. But the discomfort is the point. It signals excavation. It signals that something buried is being brought to light. The death of certainty is not the end of confidence, it's the beginning of wisdom. Socrates taught that the examined life is the only one worth living. An examination begins not with declarations, but with curiosity, not with telling, but with asking. What do I mean by this? How do I know it's true? What am I missing? Who does this belief serve? Each question peels back a layer. Each answer is provisional. Socratic thought doesn't lead to paralysis, it leads to precision. Not paralysis, because the goal isn't endless doubt. It's a well-earned conviction. To think like Socrates is to carry a lantern, not a sword. You are not there to conquer, but to illuminate. In time, others may gather near, not because you dazzled them with brilliance, but because you gave them space to see. The death of certainty is not a loss. It is a clearing. A place made ready for something deeper to grow. Socratic thinking begins with humility, not certainty. Questioning beliefs reveals assumptions we didn't know we held. True wisdom lies in clarity, not conviction. Where in your life have you mistaken confidence for understanding? Today, take one belief you've never questioned, big or small, and ask, why do I believe this? Then keep asking. Chapter 2. Assumptions are invisible architects. If beliefs were buildings, assumptions would be the foundations poured in the dark. Unseen, unexamined, and yet responsible for the entire structure above. The most dangerous ideas we hold are not the ones we debate, but the ones we never think to question. Consider the iceberg. What we express, the opinions we voice, the conclusions we reach, is just the tip. Below the surface lies a vast, silent architecture of assumptions, about how the world works, what people are like, what success means, what is fair, what is true. These assumptions don't shout. They whisper. And because they whisper in our own voice, we rarely notice they're there. Socratic questioning begins where others stop. Most people start at the conclusion and argue forward. Socrates starts at the bottom, digging backward. When someone says, "This policy is unfair," he doesn't respond with a counter-policy. He asks, "What do we mean by fair? Where does that definition come from? Has it changed over time? Does it apply equally in this case?" The goal isn't to undermine, it's to uncover. This approach isn't reserved for philosophy classes. It shows up in real life, often in moments of tension. A parent reacts sharply when their teenager questions a rule. Beneath the frustration might be an unexamined belief. Respect means obedience. But is that true? Always. What if respect could also mean dialogue? If that assumption were different, might the response be different too? Assumptions are not inherently wrong. They're shortcuts our minds use to function in a complex world. The problem arises when we forget they're shortcuts, when we treat them as maps rather than guesses. A business leader might assume that customers always want faster service. But is that universally true? Could there be scenarios where slower, more thoughtful service is more valuable? Only questioning can reveal the exceptions, and the possibilities hidden within them. Think of assumptions like tinted glass. You're looking out a window and describing what you see. The hue colors everything: the sky, the trees, even your own reflection. But if you've never noticed the tint, you assume what you're seeing is just the way things are. Socratic thinking asks, what's the color of this glass? Who installed it? When? Does it still serve me? There's a quiet strength in those who can pause mid-conversation and say, hold on, what are we assuming here? It disarms. It reframes. It takes the conflict out of the clouds and plants it back in the soil. Often, what felt like disagreement was simply a clash of invisible assumptions. This is especially true in groups. Teams reach deadlocks not because their goals differ, but because their starting premises do. One person assumes speed matters most. Another values accuracy. Unless those assumptions are surfaced, the debate remains stuck at the surface level, symptoms without diagnosis. Socratic questioning turns the invisible into the visible. And in doing so, it hands back agency. Once you can see the frame, you can choose whether to keep it. Once you see the assumption, you can revise it, replace it, or reaffirm it with intention. To think like Socrates is to become an architect of your own beliefs. Not to demolish the house every time a question arises, but to test its beams and foundations. To ask, what holds this up? Is it sound? Do I still want to live here? In a world that builds fast and questions slow, this is more than an intellectual exercise. It is an act of integrity. Assumptions are often invisible but shape everything we believe. Socratic questioning exposes the roots beneath our opinions. By revealing assumptions, we reclaim the power to reshape them. What's one belief you hold that may be built on an unchecked assumption? In your next conversation, pause and ask, what are we assuming to be true right now? Chapter 3. Every belief has a birthplace. No belief is born in isolation. Every thought you hold dear, every principle you live by, has a birthplace. It may have come from a parent's voice, a teacher's lesson, a friend's warning, or a headline that struck at just the right or wrong moment. Yet most of us walk through life treating our beliefs as if they were self-evident truths, rather than adopted inheritances. The Socratic mind doesn't just ask, what do I believe? It asks, where did this belief come from? Who handed it to me? Under what conditions was it formed? Like archaeologists of the self, Socratic thinkers dig for the origin layer, not to discard it, but to understand it. Because understanding the source of a belief gives you power over it. Until then, the belief has power over you. Consider a person who believes hard work always leads to success. On the surface, it sounds noble. But where was that belief born? Maybe it came from a childhood where approval was earned, never given freely. Maybe it formed in a culture that measures worth by productivity. Is the belief universally true? Does it still serve the believer? Or has it become a silent source of shame when success doesn't follow effort? This isn't about cynicism. It's about context. A belief pulled from its birthplace can be examined in the light. You may find it still holds. Or you may find it was a survival mechanism that no longer fits your life. Socratic thinking doesn't seek to discredit beliefs, it seeks to free them from the shadows of unexamined history. Often people fear this process. They worry that if they tug on the thread, the whole garment will unravel. But what unravels under honest inquiry was never solid to begin with. Better to rebuild with intention than to live inside inherited scaffolding that no longer holds your weight. Think of beliefs like vines. Some grow up the walls of a sturdy house, adding beauty and dimension. Others wrap tightly around the structure itself, constricting it, weakening its frame. Without tracing where each vine began, how do you know which are supporting you and which are strangling your clarity? This approach has practical implications. In leadership, for example, someone might instinctively reject remote work, believing true collaboration only happens in person. But is that belief grounded in evidence, or nostalgia? Was it formed in a time when digital tools were primitive, or when control was conflated with presence? Tracing the origin reveals whether the belief is strategic or sentimental. In relationships, the same pattern appears. One person believes conflict means something's wrong. Another believes conflict means people care. Both will approach disagreement differently, not because one is right and the other wrong, but because their beliefs were born in different emotional environments. Socratic questioning helps bridge that gap, not by choosing sides, but by understanding roots. Every belief has a birthplace. To think like Socrates is to visit that place, not to stay there, but to see clearly. To trace the belief back through memory, through influence, through emotion, and ask, is this mine? Or was it merely passed down to me like an heirloom no one thought to examine? In doing so, you don't become rootless. You become rooted by choice. Your beliefs are no longer artifacts of inheritance. They are living truths pruned, tested, and chosen. That is not doubt. That is depth. Beliefs come from somewhere: family, culture, trauma, or tradition. Understanding a belief's origin gives clarity and control. Socratic thinking helps separate inherited patterns from chosen convictions. Which belief in your life feels oldest, and when did it begin? Choose one core belief and trace its origin. Ask yourself, whose voice shaped this, and does it still fit who I am now? Chapter 4. The question that stops time. There is a moment between stimulus and response, between what happens and how we react. Most people never enter that space. They feel, they act, they justify, and the moment is gone. But the Socratic thinker knows that within that sliver of stillness lies the power to reshape an entire outcome. One question creates that stillness. what am I really responding to? It sounds simple, almost too soft to matter. But asked with intention, it halts the machinery of reflex. In a heated argument, it cools the fire just long enough to notice its fuel. In the grip of stress, it pulls back the curtain and asks whether the fear is real or rehearsed. It interrupts the automatic, giving space to the deliberate. Emotions, left unexamined, make convincing storytellers. Anger claims injustice. Fear whispers danger. Shame insists on failure. But the Socratic mind does not silence emotion, it interrogates it. Not to invalidate the feeling, but to understand the story beneath it. Often, the real trigger lies not in the present moment, but in a meaning assigned long ago. A critical email from a boss might ignite panic. But is it the words that sting, or the assumption they awaken? Perhaps the belief that criticism equals rejection was formed years ago. Without the question, the reaction seems obvious. With the question, clarity returns. The power to choose a different response appears. This is not emotional suppression. It is emotional excavation. Socratic thinking doesn't ask you to mute your feelings, it asks you to translate them. What is this emotion pointing to? What value feels threatened? What need is going unmet? In asking, the thinker shifts from victim to witness, from reaction to reflection. The question that stops time also stops conflict. When a friend's words wound, the impulse may be to defend or counterattack. But asking, what am I really responding to, reveals layers. Perhaps it's not the comment but the tone, or the timing, or the sense that respect was eroding. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about who's right, but about what's real. This shift changes relationships. It allows dialogue instead of escalation. It makes possible the rare and disarming sentence, "I'm realizing I wasn't actually upset about what you said, I was reacting to something deeper." That sentence doesn't weaken a position. It strengthens connection. It builds trust, because it shows thoughtfulness beneath emotion. Even in solitude, this question serves. In moments of self-judgment, it brings gentleness. In moments of certainty, it brings curiosity. Why am I so sure? What's beneath this urgency? It reveals whether you're reacting to the world, or to the stories you've told yourself about the world. Socrates believed the unexamined life wasn't worth living. But the examined life isn't a life of constant doubt, it's a life of conscious choice. The question that stops time doesn't eliminate feeling. It integrates it. It treats emotion not as a threat to logic, but as data to be explored. When this becomes a habit, something shifts. Life slows, not in speed, but in depth. Conversations become richer. Reactions become rarer. Reflection becomes instinct. And in that stillness, something radical takes root: wisdom. Not the wisdom of knowing everything. The wisdom of noticing. Of pausing. Of choosing to ask rather than assume. That's what this question does. It doesn't solve the problem. It slows the spiral. And in that pause, new possibilities emerge. Pausing to ask, what am I really responding to? Creates self-awareness. Socratic thinking integrates emotion by examining the story beneath it. Thoughtful questions in moments of emotion lead to clarity, not repression. Think of a recent emotional reaction. What were you really responding to beneath the surface? Today, when you feel triggered, stop and ask, what value, belief, or fear is this touching? Write it down. Chapter 5: Clarity is earned, not given. The human mind craves closure. It seeks resolution the way water seeks the lowest point. Ambiguity is uncomfortable, so we reach for explanations, not because they're true, but because they settle the tension. We mistake familiarity for understanding. We confuse the presence of words with the presence of meaning. Socrates refused that comfort. He did not accept clarity as a gift handed down from authority or tradition. He treated it as a quarry stone, something to be shaped, chipped at, interrogated until its true form emerged. For him, clarity wasn't a default state. It was a destination. This is the discipline of Socratic thinking, to resist the first answer. To pause before nodding in agreement. To carry a single statement through the fire of inquiry until only the essential remains. It's not cynicism. It's craftsmanship. Imagine a colleague says, "We need to pivot our strategy to stay relevant." The room nods. The phrase sounds intelligent, forward-thinking. But Socratic thinking doesn't settle for style. It presses. What does pivot mean here? What are we pivoting away from, and why? Relevant to whom? The goal is not to slow progress. It's to remove fog. Because decisions built on unclear language collapse under pressure. Clarity, in this way, is not a light switch. It's a sculptor's process. Each question removes excess. Each answer refines shape. Eventually, a form emerges, not perfect, but solid. Something you can stand on. Something you can act upon. This pursuit matters because language builds reality. The words we use determine the options we perceive. If we can't define a problem clearly, we can't solve it wisely. A leader who says, "Morale is low," must define morale. Is it motivation? Satisfaction? Trust? Without precision, solutions miss the mark. In personal life, the same dynamic holds. Someone says, "I feel stuck." The feeling is real, but the phrase is fog. Socratic thinking steps in. Stuck how? In what area? Compared to what vision? What's blocking movement, fear, fatigue, or lack of direction? Each question chisels towards something usable. Clarity replaces fog. Action replaces paralysis. This doesn't mean we live in a state of constant analysis. It means we question enough to make sure we're not moving blindly. The Socratic mind is not addicted to questioning, it is devoted to understanding. And understanding requires work. It requires tolerating the awkward silence after a probing question. It requires saying, "I don't know," when that is the truest thing. It requires noticing when language conceals more than it reveals. Socrates once said, "The beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms." To ask what we mean is not pedantic. It is foundational. Yet the modern world doesn't reward this. It rewards speed, certainty, and punchy declarations. That's why Socratic clarity is so powerful. It is rare. And in its rarity, it becomes influence. The person who sees clearly becomes the person others follow, not because of charisma, but because of trust. Clarity creates credibility. But clarity has a cost. It demands patience. It resists the temptation of appearing smart in favor of becoming grounded. It accepts that most things are more complex than they appear, and that the complexity is worth exploring. To think like Socrates is to earn your understanding. To treat each word like a doorway. To ask not just what is being said, but what is being assumed. To test whether the meaning holds up when pressure is applied. Clarity is not found. It is forged. And the tool is the question. Clarity isn't immediate, it's the result of disciplined questioning. Vague language conceals reasoning, precise language reveals truth. Socratic thinkers shape understanding the way a sculptor reveals form. Where in your life are you using vague language instead of seeking real clarity? Pick one belief, goal, or problem. Define it in a single, precise sentence. Then question each word until it holds. Chapter 6: Conversation as Discovery. Most people enter conversations like travelers with a destination in mind. They pack their points, map their route, and expect to arrive at agreement. But Socratic conversation is not a journey toward victory. It is an excavation. You don't go in to win, you go in to uncover. To think like Socrates is to treat dialogue not as a battleground but as a shared expedition. The goal is not to dismantle the other person's beliefs, but to follow the thread of thought, yours and theirs, until it leads somewhere deeper. Conversation becomes a lantern, not a sword. Socrates himself claimed he was like a midwife, helping others give birth to their own ideas. He asked not to inject truth, but to draw it out. His method was patient, persistent, and disarming. He didn't begin by declaring conclusions. He began by listening carefully, then asking precisely. In doing so, he revealed the shaky structures beneath confident claims, not to humiliate, but to illuminate. In most conversations today, people listen to reply, not to understand. They nod, not as a signal of agreement, but as a signal of readiness to speak. Socratic thinking turns that instinct on its head. It treats each statement as a clue, each opinion as a doorway. Curiosity replaces combat. Imagine a friend says, "People are too sensitive these days." The common move would be to argue. But the Socratic move is to ask, what does too sensitive mean to you? Compared to what time? What kinds of sensitivity do you see as helpful, and which as harmful? Suddenly, what began as a loaded opinion becomes a chance to explore values, fears, and shifting cultural norms. This kind of questioning is not always comfortable. It removes the armor of slogans and forces people into the vulnerable terrain of their own reasoning. But it also builds unexpected bridges. When done in good faith, Socratic questioning earns trust. It signals that you're not there to trap or shame, but to learn, and to help them learn too. Even disagreement becomes productive. Instead of attacking conclusions, you follow them backward. How did you come to that belief? What experiences shaped it? If that's true, what else must be true? The conversation moves from reaction to reflection, from conflict to curiosity. In the process, something remarkable happens. People begin to question themselves, not defensively, but honestly. And sometimes, they arrive at clarity they didn't have before the conversation began. They aren't argued into truth. They walk there themselves, one question at a time. But this only happens if the tone is right. Socratic questioning fails when laced with condescension. It succeeds when paired with genuine interest. The power lies not just in the questions, but in the presence behind them. That presence is rare. In a noisy world, the one who listens deeply stands out. In a combative culture, the one who asks calmly shifts the atmosphere. When others rush to conclusions, the Socratic thinker walks slowly, asking, waiting, watching. They trust that truth is not something shouted over someone else, it's something revealed in the spaces between. Conversation then becomes a mirror. It reflects what's been hidden. It reveals the scaffolding behind beliefs. And when two people engage this way, without agenda, without rush, they create something larger than either of them could have created alone: mutual understanding. That is not just a skill. It is a form of wisdom. Socratic conversation is a tool for discovery, not debate. Questions can disarm defensiveness and lead to shared insight. Listening with curiosity creates space for self-examination and clarity. When was the last time a conversation truly changed your perspective, and why? In your next discussion, ask one open-ended question that explores, not challenges. Then wait. Let silence do its work. Chapter 7: Certainty is a closed door. Certainty feels like safety. It offers closure, confidence, and the illusion of control. In a chaotic world, to be sure of something, anything, can feel like a life raft. But in the mind of a Socratic thinker, certainty is not a destination. It's a warning sign. A closed door where there should be a hallway. Socrates never claimed to know. In fact, he made a practice of admitting ignorance. Not as a performance, but as a discipline. He knew that once a mind declares itself finished, it stops learning. And where learning stops, wisdom never begins. When someone speaks with absolute conviction about politics, religion, science, or self, you can feel the door slammed shut. There's no room left for curiosity. No space for new evidence, alternative views, or even self-reflection. Certainty, in its most rigid form, becomes armor. It protects the ego, not the truth. But thinking like Socrates means staying in the space of the unfinished. It's not indecision. It's openness. A willingness to revisit, to revise, to let beliefs breathe. This doesn't mean all ideas are equally valid, or that truth is forever out of reach. It means that the path to truth requires motion, not stillness. Questions, not declarations. Consider how certainty shapes conversation. When two people argue, either is listening, each is waiting to win. But when even one person enters with Socratic humility, the temperature changes. Instead of saying, "That's wrong," they ask, How did you come to that view? Instead of, here's the truth, they ask, what if we looked at it this way? The exchange becomes a searchlight, not a spotlight. In everyday life, certainty shows up subtly. We assume we know what someone meant. We assume we understand their motives. We assume we're right about the past and justified in our anger. These assumptions feel solid, but often they're stories we've rehearsed so long we mistake them for fact. Socratic questioning inserts a wedge into that solidity. It asks, could there be another explanation? What would I see if I stepped outside myself? What if my certainty is comfort, not clarity? These questions don't demolish beliefs. They soften them, just enough to make room for truth to move in. This mindset also changes how we view others. Certainty breeds judgment. If I'm sure I'm right, then you must be wrong. But Socratic thinking replaces judgment with inquiry. Instead of labeling someone misguided or naive, it asks, what fear or value might be driving their view? This doesn't mean all perspectives are valid. It means understanding precedes evaluation. The paradox is this: the more you question, the more confident you become, not in your conclusions, but in your process. You don't need the false security of certainty when you trust your ability to think well. That's real confidence. Not the bravado of unshakable belief, but the quiet strength of a mind open to being wrong, knowing it can find its way back to what's right. Socrates didn't dismantle certainty to cause confusion. He did it to awaken courage. The courage to think, to change, to not cling to what's comfortable when something truer is asking to be seen. To him, living in certainty without inquiry was a kind of sleepwalking. And waking up, truly waking up, required the unsettling work of asking better questions. Certainty may offer the comfort of a closed door. But truth waits in the hallway, just beyond the crack, if we're willing to knock. Certainty can block discovery and breed false confidence. Socratic questioning keeps the mind open and engaged. True confidence comes from clarity of thought, not rigid belief. Where in your life have you mistaken certainty for truth? Choose one area where you feel absolutely certain. Ask yourself, what would it take for me to reconsider this, and why haven't I? Chapter 8: The Wisdom of Slow Thinking. The world does not reward slowness. It applauds speed of replies, decisions, reactions. We prize quick wit, rapid conclusions, instant insight. But the Socratic mind knows that truth doesn't sprint. It walks. It arrives slowly, not because it is hesitant, but because it is careful. To think like Socrates is to refuse the tyranny of haste. It is to adopt the pace of depth. While others chase immediacy, the Socratic thinker slows down, not out of indecision, but out of reverence for what is real. There is a kind of wisdom that only reveals itself at a slower speed. Like fog lifting from a quiet lake, insight doesn't always rush in. It waits for the surface to still. Socratic thinking invites that stillness. It creates room for the question to echo, for the assumption to be noticed, for the deeper layer to rise. Imagine someone asking, should I quit my job? The fast answer might be driven by emotion, frustration, or fear. But the Socratic path resists the impulse. It asks, what exactly is making me want to leave? Is it the role, the environment, or something in me? What need is going unmet? Each question slows the decision, stretches the perspective, and sharpens the vision. This isn't paralysis. It's refinement. It's the discipline of not confusing urgency with clarity. Some problems demand speed. But most of life's important questions are not on fire. They require simmering. The Socratic method teaches the mind to marinate in complexity instead of fleeing from it. We live in a culture of headlines and sound bites. Fast thinking dominates, snap judgments, first impressions, instant conclusions. But fast thinking, though useful in danger or routine, often misfires in matters of meaning. It glosses over nuance. It ignores contradiction. It answers before understanding the question. Socrates was slow not because he lacked brilliance, but because he honored the process. He knew that speed is often the enemy of precision. He taught in the form of dialogue, not declaration. He moved like a sculptor, not a swordsman. Slow thinking also changes how we relate to others. In an argument, the quick response may feel powerful, but it rarely heals. The slower path, pausing to ask, "What are they really trying to say?" or "What fear might be hiding behind their words?" requires more effort, but leads to more truth. It's not just intellectual. It's relational. Thoughtful questions create thoughtful space. There is also a humility in slowness. To pause before speaking, to delay judgment, to hold a question open without needing to close it immediately, these are acts of restraint. They say, "I value accuracy more than appearance. I care more about being wise than being right." That's not weakness. It's discipline. Slowness reveals. Like walking through a forest instead of racing past it in a car, you begin to notice what was always there: the shape of the terrain, the roots underfoot, the faint trails you'd otherwise miss. Socratic thinkers become attuned to those subtleties. They notice the shift in tone, the unspoken assumption, the word used too quickly and understood too little. In time, slow thinking becomes natural. The mind no longer panics in the presence of uncertainty. It settles. It explores. It trusts that clarity is worth waiting for. Thinking like Socrates is not about being slow for its own sake. It's about moving at the speed of truth. And truth, unlike noise, is never in a hurry. Slow thinking invites clarity, nuance, and depth. Socratic questioning resists haste to uncover what's real. Wisdom often arrives when urgency is replaced with presence. Where in your life are you moving too fast to see clearly? The next time you face a decision, delay your answer by 24 hours. Use that time to ask 3 deeper questions about it. Chapter 9. When questions replace control. Control is seductive. It offers the promise of order, predictability, and dominance over uncertainty. From boardrooms to dinner tables, people try to steer conversations, shape outcomes, and shield themselves from the discomfort of not knowing. But the Socratic mind holds a different kind of power, not the power of control, but the strength to release it in favor of curiosity. To question well is to relinquish the illusion that you must manage everything. Socratic inquiry is not about directing the flow of dialogue toward a pre-selected destination. It's about allowing the path to unfold, led not by answers, but by better questions. This shift feels radical in a culture obsessed with influence. Leaders are taught to persuade, parents to instruct, friends to advise. But Socratic thinkers know influence does not always come from assertion, it often comes from restraint. The courage to ask, rather than tell. The wisdom to guide, rather than push. Consider a manager whose team underperforms. The default response is to fix, to instruct, to tighten the grip. But what if, instead, the manager asked, "What's getting in the way of your best work?" Or "What do you need that you're not getting?" These questions open space. They signal trust. And often, the act of asking reveals what control would have concealed. In relationships, too, control often disguises itself as care. A parent demands compliance, believing it shows love. A partner pushes advice, believing it shows support. But Socratic questioning takes a different posture. It asks, "What are you feeling right now?" Or, "What would help you feel heard?" It does not direct. It invites. This approach does not mean surrendering boundaries or leadership. It means recognizing that control rarely produces transformation. But questions? They invite participation. They awaken ownership. They shift the other person from a passive recipient to an active participant in their own insight. The Socratic method trusts that people can think, if given the space, the silence, and the right question. This trust is powerful. It changes the posture of dialogue from dominance to discovery. Instead of thinking, "How do I convince them?" the Socratic thinker asks, "What might they see if I help them explore more deeply?" It also changes the inner dialogue. When facing fear, the instinct is to control the situation. But the Socratic mind asks, "What exactly am I afraid of? What outcome am I trying to prevent? What would happen if I didn't control this?" Often, the grip loosens. Anxiety gives way to clarity. Control seeks certainty. Questions invite possibility. Control assumes there is one correct path. Questions reveal many. To live like Socrates is not to abandon responsibility, but to exchange tightness for openness, without losing intention. This shift is not always comfortable. Letting go of control feels vulnerable. It means not knowing how the conversation will end. It means being okay with silence. It means trusting that the process of questioning may lead somewhere better than anything control could have planned. But when this shift occurs, something quiet and profound happens. The people around you feel it. They lean in. They reflect more deeply. They answer not to comply, but to discover. And in that space, truth is more likely to emerge, because it has not been forced. Socrates did not wield power by overpowering. He shaped minds by giving them space to think. He questioned, not to manipulate, but to liberate. To think like him is to understand. The moment you stop controlling the conversation is often the moment it becomes most alive. Socratic questioning replaces control with curiosity and trust. Influence grows not by force, but through space-making inquiry. Letting go of control often leads to deeper clarity, for both parties. Where are you holding on too tightly, and what question could loosen your grip? Choose one conversation this week where you'd normally direct. Instead, ask one open-ended question, and let silence do the rest. Chapter 10. The Courage to Stay in the Gray. The world aches for black and white answers. They comfort. They simplify. They reduce complex problems to slogans, people to positions, and decisions to binaries. But the truth, raw, layered, inconvenient, rarely fits into such neat categories. Socratic thinking begins where simplicity ends. It requires the courage to stand in the gray. Gray is the space between easy answers. It's where nuance lives, where contradictions breathe, and where real understanding begins. Most avoid it because it feels unstable. But Socrates lived there. He questioned both sides of an argument not to pick a winner, but to clarify the terrain. His goal wasn't certainty, it was insight. To stay in the gray is to sit with tension. It's to hold competing truths in the same hand without rushing to resolve them. The person who can say, "I see your point, and I also see another," is not indecisive. They are disciplined. They have trained their minds to resist premature closure. In modern discourse, gray is often mistaken for weakness. In politics, in ethics, in relationships, people want clear stances. But clarity is not the same as extremity. Socratic clarity comes from exploration, not allegiance. It asks, what if both views hold a shard of truth? What are we missing in our rush to choose sides? Imagine a debate about technology. One person says it's eroding attention and connection. Another says it's a tool for empowerment and progress. Socratic thinking doesn't rush to pick a side. It asks, in what context is each true? What assumptions are each based on? What deeper values are being expressed? The aim is not to dilute conviction. It's to elevate complexity. This discipline matters most when stakes are high. When beliefs feel sacred. When disagreement feels like betrayal. In those moments, staying in the gray requires unusual courage. It means asking questions even when you fear the answers might unsettle your worldview. It means refusing to demonize the other side just to feel morally secure. Socratic thinkers do not seek confusion. They seek a fuller truth, one that survives the heat of scrutiny and the weight of contradiction. They know that simple answers often hide the real questions. So they wait. They probe. They sit in ambiguity long enough for clarity to emerge, not as a conclusion, but as a well-lit middle ground. This isn't passivity. It's precision. It's knowing that rushing to label shuts down listening. That the urge to categorize often blinds us to the human story behind the opinion. Gray thinking doesn't mean being neutral. It means being honest about complexity. This habit transforms relationships. It allows for disagreement without dismissal. It invites conversations where no one has to win, but everyone walks away seeing more clearly. It says, I'm not here to convert you. I'm here to understand what's really at play for both of us. To stay in the gray is also to face yourself. To admit that some of your own beliefs have holes. That you might be wrong, or at least partially blind. This isn't shameful. It's liberating. It allows you to evolve, to update your thinking as life deepens and experience widens. Socrates stayed in the gray not because he lacked answers, but because he refused to accept false ones. His greatness wasn't in having the final word, it was in asking the better one. To think like him is to step into the gray with eyes open, spine straight, and questions ready. Because it is in that uncertain light that truth begins to take shape. Socratic thinking embraces complexity over simplistic answers. Staying in the gray allows for deeper understanding and empathy. Wisdom lives in the tension between opposing ideas, not outside it. Where in your life have you rushed to certainty when what was needed was deeper exploration? This week, when faced with a divisive issue, list 3 truths from both sides. Don't decide, just observe. Chapter 11. The examined life is the chosen life. At his trial, Socrates was offered a way out. Renounce your questioning. Stop unsettling the comfortable. Agree to live in quiet compliance. He refused. Instead, he chose death over the abandonment of thought. Not because he craved martyrdom, but because he understood the cost of a life unexamined. The unexamined life is not worth living. He said not as a slogan, but as a final, clear-eyed truth. To think like Socrates is not just to ask better questions. It is to live a better life. Not easier, not safer, but freer. A life where belief is chosen, not inherited. Where truth is pursued, not presumed. Where meaning is uncovered, not dictated. An examined life is not defined by the number of questions asked, but by the courage to ask them at all. It resists the inertia of passive living. It breaks the autopilot of routine assumptions. It refuses to settle for answers that merely sound good. Instead, it turns inward and outward at once, interrogating the self while engaging the world. In such a life, values are not worn like labels, but tested like tools. What do I claim to stand for? When did I begin to believe that? Who shaped it? Does it hold under pressure? The Socratic mind sharpens belief through contact with doubt, not to weaken it, but to make it real. This way of living touches everything. It reshapes how decisions are made, not through reaction, but through reflection. It alters relationships, not by demanding agreement, but by deepening understanding. It even reframes failure, not as proof of inadequacy, but as raw material for insight. The examined life also means choosing awareness over ease. It means noticing the emotional charge behind opinions. It means recognizing when you are defending your ego instead of your principles. It means seeing the quiet moments, the pause before the reply, the hesitation before judgment, as sacred openings where wisdom waits. Socratic thinking offers no formulas. It is not a shortcut to peace or success. But it is a reliable path to integrity. To live examined is to bring your full mind to your full life. To act, speak, and decide from a place of honest clarity, not borrowed conviction. It is possible to succeed without this. Many do. It is possible to live comfortably, surrounded by unquestioned beliefs, never disrupting the surface. But something vital is missed. Something elemental. Without examination, we mistake the voices in our heads for our own. We live a script written by others and call it choice. But when you question with courage, you claim authorship. You live awake. You become the kind of person who can walk into complexity without flinching. Who can disagree without disrespect. Who can say, "I don't know," and mean it with strength. This is not reserved for philosophers. It is for anyone willing to live with eyes open. For parents guiding children through difficult questions. For leaders shaping decisions with care. For individuals standing at crossroads, unsure which path to take. The examined life offers no guarantees, only the clarity to choose with awareness. Socrates didn't leave us doctrines. He left us a method. A way of thinking that centers not on knowing more, but on knowing more clearly. He taught that truth isn't handed down. It's drawn out, layer by layer, moment by moment, question by question. To think like Socrates is to choose this way of living. Not once, but again and again. Not perfectly, but persistently. And in doing so, To become not just a thinker, but a chooser. Not just a seeker of truth, but one who dares to live in it. An examined life is a life of clarity, courage, and conscious choice. Socratic thinking turns living into an intentional act, not a passive drift. The true reward of questioning is the freedom to live authentically. What part of your life is still lived on autopilot, and what question could wake it up? Write down one belief, one habit, and one value you've never questioned. This week, examine each, gently, but honestly. Take care and be well.